You're listening to Wit in the Word, the podcast where wisdom meets humor, where two friends with one faith dig into Scripture to explore how it shapes and connects us. It's a space for insight, laughter, and some wild deep dives. I'm Annie.
And this is Jessie.
And together, we'll uncover how wit in the Word weave meaning into our lives. Let's get started. Welcome back. I'm Annie, and this is my friend Jessie. One thing we're super excited to share this week, if you haven't realized already, our sound quality is way better. That's because we're recording in a brand new studio. We've been blessed to be able to join up with Star Media Productions right here in Laverne, Minnesota. They have a podcast suite in their office and have reached out to work with us. So, in this week's Get to Know Us section of the podcast, I think it's about time to chat about our families. Jessie, why don't you tell us about yours?
Sure. I am from Laverne, Minnesota. I've lived here all my life, and I met my husband, Kurt, in high school, and we got married. We also have 3 children. Ashton is our oldest, and he is a senior at SDSU. And then we have Vaughn, who is a 10th grader, and Elena, who is an 8th grader.
Nice. Ditto to everything but the number of children, and I didn't marry a Kurt. I married a Nick. So I have 6 kids, and but yes, born and raised here in Laverne, and I also met Nick in high school. So, but yeah, as far as our kids go, Peyton is our oldest. He's at SDSU, and then we have Hallie. She is currently living in the working world, and then we have Hank. He is also a 10th grader. And then Brinley, she is a 7th grader. Cambry's a 4th grader. And then we have Dirk, our little tail ender, who's 4. So age range 23 to 4. So I've kind of been...
She's really busy.
Momming for a long time. So anyways, yeah, just a little bit about it. We like to let you guys get to know us a little bit more. But yeah, from here we'll be diving in. We are starting in chapter 2 of Ruth. So we're going to go ahead and read that to you. We're going to read Ruth 2, verses 1 through 10.
Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor." Naomi said to her, "Go ahead, my daughter." So she went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you." "The Lord bless you," they answered. Boaz asked the overseers of his harvesters, "Who does the young woman belong to?" The overseers replied, "She is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi." She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters." She came into the field and has remained here from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. So Boaz said to Ruth, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting, and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you. And wherever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled." At this, she bowed down with her face to the ground. She asked him, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?"
All right from the get-go, in verse 1 of chapter 2, we're introduced to a vital character. We meet a man named Boaz, who is a relative of Naomi. It says he's from the clan of Elimelech. We don't actually know how they were related, maybe a cousin or something, but in my kind of deep dive little search, I didn't really find any direct correlation. If you remember, Elimelech was Naomi's husband, so all we know is he's from a clan of Elimelech. Another important thing to note is that he's a man of standing. So I was kind of pondering, I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And I looked it up. The definition says a noteworthy member of the community, a man of high social standing in his community. So that's kind of the picture of Boaz right from the get-go.
Well, and mine actually says rich or influential or wealthy also. So could be a mixture of those things altogether. Mm-hmm. And we have that his name, Boaz, also means strength or swiftness. We talk about here he is still in Bethlehem. So Boaz didn't leave Bethlehem during the famine like Elimelech and Naomi did. And because he did decide to stay, it looks like God has blessed him now.
So I think if that's the first thing that you read in this chapter, is that we can look at with Naomi and Elimelech. Obviously, he's no longer alive, and she's present and returned. But because they didn't necessarily trust God, I think we can just see that if you would have stayed, there was potential that God would continue to bless you. He promised that he would continue to take care of his chosen people. And so we have this right here with Boaz. Then we go on there to Ruth being faithful to Naomi even more in verse 2. It says, Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go into the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone whose eyes I find favor.
Well, and mine says, please let me go to the fields. In mine, there's a lot of pleases. And it just makes me think like, yeah, she's begging to do really hard work. And that speaks to, I think, her heart for wanting to take care of Naomi.
Yeah, I mean, I think she could just step back and complain about their situation. I'm a foreigner. We don't have anything. We have no way to take care of ourselves. And instead, she's like, let me go do hard work.
So it doesn't use the word glean here, but that's basically what she's going to be doing. She's saying, let me go and gather the grain he leaves behind. And so what is gleaning?
I don't know. What is gleaning?
Well, the dictionary definition is to extract something from various sources, gradually collecting it but bit by bit. But historically, it has meant to gather leftover grain or other produce after a harvest. And so gleaning was a practice at this time of going to a recently harvested field and picking up the remains. And that was something that was actually instructed to be done by Jewish law. In Leviticus 19, 9 and 10, it says, when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord your God. And it says basically the same thing in Deuteronomy 24, verses 19 through 22. But it does add the fatherless and the widow. And to remember that you were once slaves in Egypt. Basically, that is why you need to do this. But so it was commanded by the law that they needed to leave food behind to take care of people. So it was a way to take care of the poor, the fatherless, the widows. Still did have to go out and do work. And there was like dignity in having to do something to take care of yourself. But that was how they took care of people.
And I think there's a lot of people who would kind of be okay with that. Like, okay, they're still going to go out and work. They're still, kind of have a purpose, versus like now sometimes people get so frustrated because it's like, oh, they're just living off the system or whatever that looks like.
But to that extent, these people left up to 25% of whatever they were supposed to take in the field. Right. They didn't go to the edges. They didn't go through it more than once. If things fell off the cart, they had to leave it. So you generally left up to about 25% of everything that you would have produced or could have made money from in the field. And do you think that people are at a place where they give away 25% of their wealth right now?
No, I don't think so. Do you?
No.
I mean, even we're called to give 10% to the church, and I don't think people give 10% to the church, and not just like the church building, the church collectively as a whole. And we're told to do that in the Bible too. So it's just interesting. I think we're very greedy. We don't necessarily choose to take care of people. We're all like, go out and do it. You can handle it. Just that attitude of, yeah, if you go out and work, I'll let you do it. And yet there are people who just can't. And
right.
So I do like how they at least set up a process. But yet, interestingly enough, there'd probably be people who were handicapped, couldn't go out and do stuff. And who was taking care of them?
The story of like the lame man or the blind person. Like they can't go and glean in a field.
Yeah. So in big picture, it's a great thing. But yes, there are people who probably still weren't being cared for very well. So we have Ruth. Naomi tells her, go ahead, my daughter. So she goes out and she enters a field and begins to glean behind the harvesters. I did find it really interesting at the end of verse 2 there, where she says she's going to pick up the leftover grain behind anyone whose eyes I find favor. And so she does really understand her place, like where she's at. I think and I have to find somebody who's going to be okay with me doing that. I mean, that's how I read that. Even though it's like, yes, they're going to leave 25% behind and whatever that looks like, it could be not a great situation. And I think as we keep going, we're going to learn a little bit more about what could happen to a woman who goes out by herself in a field. And so I think she's trusting God there when she goes out to do this work. And so as we continue to go on there, then we have Naomi says, go ahead, my daughter. And so she goes out and she enters a field and she begins to glean behind the harvesters. As it turns out, she's working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. So we've already heard about Boaz, and this is just another example of what we talked about last week. This is God's providence, you know, right there. His plan all along. She enters into a field of a man who we heard great things about.
And I like how it's like, it just so happened. Like, who would have thought? God thought.
Yeah,
okay?
exactly. And she trusted that, I think. Like, I'm going to go out and do this hard work, and if I follow God and I trust him, he'll have my back. And so that's what we're seeing here. And so, yeah, she's in this field. She's working, obviously. And then Boaz shows up. He greets his harvesters. He says right away, "The Lord be with you. The Lord bless you," they answer. And so you can tell that the situations in this field are pretty positive experience.
Right. He seems like he's a great boss. And his workers also appreciate him. And so it's just a really great workplace. And again, I think this just shows you Boaz's heart. It's setting up Ruth saying, please, can I do this? And please, can I do that? And Boaz being, may the Lord be with you. May the Lord bless you. Like, they're both people who have a heart for God.
I think I totally agree with that. And as we keep going in verse 5, you also can tell that he pays attention. So, like, I don't know how many people are working in this field or what that looks like, but he's able to look around and realize that there's somebody there.
Who that girl be?
I know, who that girl, you know? And, I mean, is she pretty? I don't know. We don't get any of that kind of stuff, but immediately he's like, who does that young woman belong to? And maybe it is just weird. Maybe there's not any random young women that just show up in fields in these kind of situations.
Yeah, I don't know.
So, but the overseer knows who she is. She's the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. She says, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters. She came into the field and has remained here all morning until now, except for a short rest in the shelter. So, I mean, she is working hard.
She is. And again, she says, please let me follow the workers, showing her heart again, because gleaning was her right by law, but she was still being kind and still asking.
She didn't just show up and be like, give me this. She's saying, please let me be here, because that's just it. She wants them to find favor in her.
Yep.
Make the hard situation potentially a little bit easier.
And then we go into 8, and Boaz says, listen, my daughter. And he could have called her a lot of things, being that she was a foreigner, that she was a Moabite, that she was a widow, and he doesn't condemn her. He doesn't call her anything uncouth. He uses a term of endearment to speak to her and of her without even really knowing her. And again, I think that just speaks to Boaz's heart and how kind he is. And he says, don't go gather grain for yourself in another field. Don't even leave this field at all, but to continue to follow closely behind my women workers. I mean, I do think he's the kind of person who's probably kind to everyone, but seeing her specifically, I wonder if he had some feelings like she's a lot like my mom, who would have been Rahab, who was also a foreigner. She was not Jewish either. She was the woman who was a prostitute in Jericho, and she helped hide 2 spies. And then the walls of Jericho fall down, and the Jewish people come and they take her and her family, and she leaves. And eventually she marries Salam, and they have Boaz. So his own mother was somebody who was a foreigner and looked down upon. And so maybe he had a heart for Ruth in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that totally makes sense. You know, especially if Rahab was able to say, like, this is what happened to me, and this is how God provided for our family. I think it's great that she created a man of character, and that's how we see him act to Ruth.
I just want to say, with like all of the Netflix and Hollywood things coming out with Christian content, I was like, what a story of like Rahab, and I don't know if his name's Salam or Solam.
I think the first one sounds.
Anyways, it's a spy scopes out enemy territory. Harlot saves the spy. City is conquered. Spy returns to rescue her. Then they marry and become one of the core upstanding families of the nation. That sounds like a really good movie.
That's true. I mean, and Netflix already did Ruth and Boaz.
I know.
Which was good.
I haven't watched it yet.
Yes, it's good. You should watch it. I just think that's crazy how we're jumping into this and we picked the book of Ruth, and then boom, right after that, here comes this Netflix special. And I've been teaching on this subject in youth group and things like that. And I was like, there's just something for the world to hear about Ruth, and we're going to get there.
And I hear that, but I'm just telling you, the whole spy, prostitute, walls falling down. Like, there's a lot more drama.
That's like an action.
That's an action
one.
movie.
Absolutely. We're we're going to take royalties on that one, at least 2%. It was her idea. She said it, but it comes out of the Bible, so I don't know if we can get
I was
paid
like,
for
I
that.
don't think you can call dibs on the Bible. I don't think it works like that.
Whatever. Netflix apparently did. Now we're going to get sued.
Better now, but we don't have a lot of
that.
money yet.
So, but anyways, going back to, just him and how he treats her in verses 8 and 9, he definitely didn't have to do that. He didn't even take the time to do that. And yet, here we are. One thing I did find interesting there in verse 8, stay here with the women who work with me. And I tried to look that up. Like, how many women worked in fields? Like, are they the women who were all the poor and the needy? I said earlier, maybe she's unique and standing out because she's this woman alone. But then we do have here.
It says women workers.
Yes.
So they were his employees.
I know. Interesting.
And so I'm guessing, and in here it also says the servant girls or the young women. Yeah, I don't know.
And they could just be like servant women and just stay with them.
I mean, I do talk
Well, it
about...
says follow along after the women. So she's following them. And they must be also doing the work in the field.
Follow them, the women gathering. Hebrew pronoun is feminine. So women were reaping the grain.
Yeah.
It wasn't just men.
I know. So I thought that was interesting. I tried to go on a little deep dive about, like, really, did women work in the fields? What did that look like?
Yes.
And I didn't really find a lot. But obviously, we know it says it here. But I would have assumed that it would be men that would be working in the fields. But now we have the next line after that. Follow the women. I've told the men not to lay a hand on you. And so I think we talked about that already. Like, she's trying to find a field where she knows that they're going to find favor in her because she understands how dangerous of a situation this is.
It's basically an anti-sexual harassment law right there. I told my young men not to bother you. Before I get into that, I want to jump back and saying, so she gets to follow behind these women workers and harvest, which means she's going to get every benefit of an employee. She gets to keep all that she has gathered, and she gets to glean more than anyone else because she's first behind the workers.
That's true.
But yes, first, anti-sexual harassment law, because the fields are a dangerous place for women, especially without male protection. And so Boaz is saying, I can't protect you if you step outside of my field because I don't have authority in other fields. So if you stay in my field, my workers have to follow my rules, listen to my authority. And if I tell them not to do inappropriate things with you, then they won't. And I want to keep you safe. So stay here. So we had talked about how Ruth takes place during the time of the Judges. And then in Judges, you have the story, Judges 19, called the Levite and his concubine. And then we also have verses from Deuteronomy 25 through 29. And it talks about what happens if you get caught by a man out in the countryside by yourself. And so these things were happening and they were trying to police them the best they could, but it was still a dangerous place for a woman to be.
Yeah, so if you remember just kind of what you said all the way back to the beginning, we were in the days of the judges and there was no king and everyone did as they saw fit, and so God was really looking upon those people and just being like, everyone is incredibly selfish. Then he'd bring up a judge and, they try to put things back into order. And so we just are living in a time where people were just giving in to their fleshly desires left and right. And so for women, they weren't safe. And so I think that's why it's important that get to be introduced to a godly man like Boaz and that he goes out of his way to protect Ruth.
And she didn't know whether or not Boaz was going to be a godly man, and she still stepped out in faith, believing that God would protect her when she went into this field. And then it makes me think, I'm just as protected by God. What am I not stepping out in faith in because I'm too afraid?
Interesting.
And then it goes on to say, I won't let my men touch you or bother you. And when you are thirsty, you may go and drink from the water jugs that the young men have filled. So drawing water is typically the job of either foreigners or women, but this water is being drawn by Israelite men. And he's saying, you can drink the water that my Israelite men have drawn. And I think it's talking about how Boaz has the heart of God where men and women, they are on equal standing. So it's an incredible honor for her to get to drink that water in that time period because that wasn't something generally that women would be allowed to do. And I think it's also just flipping the script of everything that we read from Judges 19 and Deuteronomy about women. But he is saying that wasn't God's plan. That wasn't God's idea. That's what all happened because of the fall. In God's kingdom, we are equal.
Yeah. And so I think that's just a great example that you see women who are in this vulnerable state. And so you can think nowadays of people who are in that place. And Boaz is an example of how we should step out and care for people, regardless if they're not at the same place or status as we are. And so it didn't it didn't take him anything to say, I'm just going to protect you. You can also drink that water. It wasn't that much more work for him to step out and do that. And so I think there's places in everybody's lives where we can look at our situations and be like, how do we help people who are vulnerable? Like we're in a place in especially in our world where I think people are just becoming more and more marginalized.
I mean, because I went down the rabbit trail of men and women being equal, but I think you're right. It's also about the Israelite and the foreigner, the Jewish and the Gentile, all also
she just represents
being equal
all of it. Yeah.
and on the same level, and not one is closer to God than the other or has more authority than the other.
Yeah. So I think it represents both of that. I mean, like for us as women, we're like, yeah, the women part, and we go in that direction. But yet we are surrounded by people from foreign lands. And yet we ourselves were foreigners at one time, right? I mean, we're Dutch. You're not Dutch, you're German. But and reality is as immigrants and foreigners, our family that came here before us probably weren't treated the greatest. But we don't have to be the same. We could continue down that path, or we could be the Boaz. We could say, no, we're going to care for you just like everybody else. You can drink the same water I drink. Like there is zero reason for there to be a difference. We're all created the same in God's eyes. And that's where I think Boaz is just such a great example.
Something that I just thought about is how when we read the New Testament and even some of the Old Testament, it really talks about how Jewish people wanted to stay ceremoniously clean. And so they wouldn't eat with Gentiles. They wouldn't touch Gentiles. They would shake the dust off their shoes when they went to Gentile territory because they didn't want even a shred of Gentile dust to be brought back to their town. And so we don't really talk about that cleanliness thing until we get to the New Testament. But even here is kind of a little snippet of where they're saying, you're not going to make us unclean from drinking the same water as we do.
Oh, so that could totally be that overlapping in there too. Not necessarily just you can't drink from the men's water. They went and drew it up themselves, which is, yeah, like you said, not normal practice. We know over and over again that the women are the one that go drop the water. But yeah, they might have been thinking those thoughts.
Yeah, they were like,
you're an unclean foreigner. You are a Moabite.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to go to the mikvah and like douse myself, and I don't have time for that today.
Yeah, no, this is harvest time.
Yeah.
Like, what one of our farmer husbands would leave and go to the mikvah to clean themselves in the middle of harvest. We can't even get them to go out to eat or something, right?
Right.
So
I wonder if that was, and maybe if she used a different cup, so they're like, fine, whatever. But I wonder if some of that was maybe also playing in their heads. Like, if she drinks the same water as us, what kind of ceremonially cleansing am I going to have to do?
True.
And I do not have time for this right now.
So yet it just shows Boaz so far ahead of his time.
Oh, he was.
Just an honorable dude.
Just being him. Just being a him.
I'm here for him. So let's keep going. At this, she bowed down with her face to the ground. She asked him, why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner? I mean, it really is such a beautiful picture. Like, she understands exactly everything that he did for her. And, she doesn't just like get on her knees. Like, she is falling prostrate on the ground with her face to the ground.
Prostrate. Yes, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Mine says, I am not an Israelite, which means she's a Gentile or, like you said, a foreigner. She is just, I think, at a place where she is overwhelmed by his generosity when she did nothing to earn it, which, spoiler alert, is grace, which, spoiler alert, Boaz is a Jesus figure.
Yes. So we're no longer really spoiler alerting you guys. We are stepping into that story now.
Yes.
We get to see Boaz as this example of somebody who gives something to somebody who doesn't necessarily deserve it. And yet, we see Ruth as this admirable person who actually does deserve this. She gets to be treated that way because she's out there busting her butt, working in the fields and doing all this stuff, and he recognizes that. But because of who she is, where she came from, her family lines, and all those things that is so important in the Old Testament, she doesn't deserve it. And yet here we have him being like, I find favor in you. She doesn't understand why. And her response is so accurate to that. It's, I don't deserve this. On my knees, face to the ground. And it's that same picture of what we don't deserve. And so when we come into a moment where we get to stand on holy ground, that should be our reaction every single time. Like, God, why did you send your son to die on the cross and save me from my sins because I don't deserve it? I just continually over and over and over again mess up. And yet, grace. And then he calls her, like you said, my daughter. There's this familial touch there. Like he sees her as more than just this foreigner who's trying to take care of her family. And so that's such a beautiful picture. And we do need to take that moment and just take a look at that and be like, how does she respond? And so that's as far as we're going to go for this week. We're ending here at verse 10. And I really think that, like I said, as we take that time and that moment to just reflect, that's probably our takeaway this week. And so tune in next time as we just check out the rest of chapter 2.
Wit and the Word is recorded at the Star Media Podcasting Suite in downtown Laverne. For more information, please reach out and we'll get you in touch with the right people. Thanks for joining us on Wit and the Word, where we explore how meaning, context, and language shape our understanding of Scripture. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a conversation. Until next time, keep your wit sharp and your words full of life-giving encouragement, hope, love, and truth.